Hello, my name is Chris Carville. Welcome to my podcast, Pedaling Squares Through a Mammal's Life, where we talk about all things endurance training and endurance racing from a master's athlete's perspective. It's March, it's springtime, which is a great time to think about a bike fit. If your bike doesn't fit, if you're uncomfortable on your bike, you're not going to ride it. It's that simple. But the realities of a bike fit are much, much more complicated. Very few of us are born perfectly symmetrical left to right, and none of us have gotten to this point in our racing and training careers without some variety of injury. An old shoulder injury, a back injury, a surgery of some variety, an anatomical issue, a leg length discrepancy, for example, or pronation in one or the other foot. All these things can lead to knee pain and potentially a knee injury. Same goes for the neck, same goes for the hands. And you can stay ahead of these issues or correct for them with an expert bike fit. And that's where Mitch comes in. Mitch Graham is the owner of BioWheels Fit Studio and Workshop located in Cincinnati, Ohio. He has clients from all over the country who come for bike fittings. He has been in the business for 15 years. He's a master retool fitter and an IBFI level 3 fitter. Please enjoy the podcast. Fire up your smart trainers, fire up your treadmills, and enjoy a conversation with Mitch Graham on all things bike fitting. Welcome to Pedaling Squares, where we talk all things bikes and endurance athletes from a master athlete's perspective. And today we have the honor of talking with Mitch Graham. So viewers and listeners, I'd like to introduce you to Mitch. Mitch is the owner and operator of BioWheels Fit Studio and BioWheels Bike Shop. BioWheels is one of the premier high-end bike shops in southwestern Ohio. And Mitch is a nationally recognized bike fitter with 15 years practice focusing on professional bike fitting, 10 years as a retool bike fitter, 6 years as a certified retool master fitter. And Mitch is also recognized by the International Bike Fitting Institute, the IBFI, as a level 3 fitter, a level reserved for the top of the profession. In addition to the foregoing, he's traveled to complete 9 bike fitting certifications, and Mitch has fitted thousands upon thousands of road cyclists, triathletes, time trialists, mountain bikers, and cyclocross riders of all types, from beginner to professional athlete. Welcome, Mitch.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Did I leave anything out?
Maybe a few things, but we can get to that.
We'll hit them as we roll through here.
Sure.
But before we get into bikes and bike fitting, I wanted to talk about your background as an endurance athlete and really how you came into cycling in the first place. I know that you grew up in upstate New York, and as a younger man, you were a standout runner in high school. And the question really is, if that's where it began, how did you discover running?
Growing up in the country on farms, all of my neighbors, all the kids, that we were the same age, we'd run around the barns, play chase. And, besides that, we'd ride bikes, ride motorcycles, just, go crazy. So that's kind of where running began. And then we had like in grade school, we would have an end of the year kind of track meet, so to speak. So when I was in 6th grade, I won like whatever the long distance event was for our class. So the track coach was there recruiting for like middle school and high school. and he mentioned that I should look into track, and I'd never been in like an official sport before. So, that was probably the first time I even thought of it. And
so track coach with a clipboard at the 6th grade graduation. That's where it all started.
Yeah, the track meet out in the fields. It was fun, but yeah, that was a really long time ago. But yeah, and then I didn't actually start track until 10th grade, and I can't remember why because it was so long ago. But I started out as a sprinter, and I was too slow, so they kept moving me up from 100 to 200. Too slow there, then 400. I guess I was too slow there, and then 800. I was, I guess respectable, so they stuck me in the 800 and the pole vault that year. And yeah, that was one and done year for the pole vault, but the 800 stuck, and then I got into cross country the following fall, and then just kind of,
So you discovered your strengths by process of elimination.
I think that's how they do it with a lot of kids. Yeah, so the distance runners are the ones that can't sprint. Yeah, in the long, it's the 2 mile if you can't do that 800 or the mile. So.
Well, I guess if they did it the other way, and everybody started out as a distance runner, they'd discourage all the sprinters.
Probably.
So they start from easy and go to hard is really what you're saying.
I would imagine so. Yeah, that's what they did with me.
So they're just whittling out or whittling down to the toughest runners. That's my take on it.
Sure. Go with that.
So you run for both track and cross country, and somehow you get the attention of a certain local legend, both running wise and coaching wise here in Cincinnati, Bob Ronker, correct?
Partially.
Okay.
Should I elaborate a little bit? So I actually, so I looked into Xavier because, when we were in high school, Xavier beat Georgetown in the NCAA tournament to go into the Sweet 16. And I was a big basketball fan, being from the upstate New York, Syracuse area. Georgetown was the arch nemesis of Syracuse. That was our local school. And so I learned about Xavier through that. And I probably the next day went into our guidance counselor's office and then found the Xavier guidebook in where all the stacks of the college guidebook. I remember that. I don't even.
Yeah, that was pre-Google for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I went in there and pulled that out. I'm like, oh man, it's a beautiful campus, and Cincinnati seems pretty cool. And before that, I'd just been looking at state like SUNY schools, Buffalo State, things like that, and so it's like it seemed exotic, and I called up the school and I said, hey, I'm a runner. I'm interested in running, possibly for your program. Who's the coach? Can I get a call from the coach? That kind of thing. And then Bob called me up and we did a visit sometime in the spring, my senior year, and that locked it in. I fell in love with Cincinnati, the campus, everything about it. So
you were probably up here on one of our rare, beautiful spring days. And you just figured it'd be like that all spring long.
I remember they had the car show at Alt Park, and Bob drove me around to all the parks and just through downtown and over the suspension bridge, and it was just like being from the boonies of upstate New York, and my graduating class was 50. Living around fields. I mean, it was awesome. Just so I wanted to come here.
So the Rube goes to the big city, Cincinnati.
Yep.
Finds himself. And here we are, all these years later.
I don't know. Crazy.
So you had a pretty good career at Xavier. I want to pump you up just a little bit here. For all our viewers and listeners that don't automatically know, what is the distance of a college cross-country meet?
It's 8K majority of the season, and then switches to 10K cross-country for regionals and then nationals.
Okay. And then your PR?
So my PR was junior year, and it's like 25:33.
And if my math is correct, that averages out to roughly a 5-minute mile.
Yeah, a little more than that. Five
and some change.
6, 5, 7, yeah.
Yeah, and cleats on grass.
Round down to 5 minutes.
Well, as we get older, our records get better and our speed is faster than it was once upon a time, but that's still pretty fast running on grass and running in cleats.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah. And that record stood for a few years.
That was at Landon Deerfield. We had our conference championships here in Cincinnati, so I PR'd there. That was cool. Landon, where all the mountain bike trails are now.
So that was a preview to your mountain biking career, getting to see all those trails.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't think they had anything there then. They had some trails, but mountain biking, I don't think at that point had been around yet.
And how do you make that jump from cycle or from running to cycling?
Well, like most of my customers, that you get injured as a runner, and you just get tired of the injuries, and you get tired of being beat up and having to take time off all the time. So I at the time I graduated from Xavier, I probably had a dozen injuries that put me out for 6 weeks, stress fractures and, IT band, this or that, broken ankles, stress fracture in the foot. So yeah, I tried to do another year after college, tried to train as a runner, and just was done, just mentally checked out after my last injury. And I was, how did I get into mountain biking? I came into Bio Wheels its first year in business and was in the market for a mountain bike just for, going around my house and campus and stuff, kind of a commuter bike, was looking for something like that. And I came in the shop, they all were mountain bikers. They all raced mountain bikes, and they were all racing on the weekends, working during the week. And I just kind of overheard them talking about racing bikes, and, enough of that interaction. And I was like really interested in, changing up and quitting running and trying mountain biking out. So you may remember when I had that mountain bike stolen from our house.
Yes.
And, which bummed me out. So I didn't have a bike, and I was really wanting to start using it more. And so I came back into Bio Wheels. I'd saved up for 2 weeks, everything I made, and I'm like, all right, I put like $1,200 down on the counter. I'm like, can I get that bike for this? And they said, yeah. So I got that ProFlex full suspension mountain bike, which
I remember that bike.
I'm awesome. And then I'm like, all right, where's the race this weekend? And it was near Bloomington. It was at Haley Peaks, to the Dino race, Indiana race, and drove 3 hours or whatever to that. And I came in last. I blanked, but I had such a blast, and I was hooked. So
it was the best DFL you've ever had.
Yeah.
Well, you turned that around, didn't you? With a few wins, maybe 24 hours of spring series.
Well, that was much further down the road, but I raced almost every race that year. That was 95, and made my way up to, by the last race, I'd won sport class, and I just wanted to move up to expert as soon as I could. And then the following year, I raced expert, back to getting my butt kicked. Took a long time to be anywhere near the front. So it probably wasn't until 97 when my fitness got good enough and specific enough for cycling to be in the top 10 in an expert race. And so, yeah, just kept getting better and better. And then, early 2000s was winning races, and yeah, it took a while. Runners don't always have like the right kind of strength to.
Yeah.
I mean, you need the skill, with mountain biking. So it took a long time to be able to ride faster and faster and not crash into trees all the time. So, there's that too. And
yeah, you could have just picked road racing, and you wouldn't have those trees in your way. Just put that engine to use.
Sure, I tried that too, and I did some road racing around. I just didn't enjoy it as much. I didn't have a team, so I would just show up and do a race, and just I just loved mountain biking back then. And and then road racing, I started to do that because it was really muddy, and we come to find out that riding in the mud isn't great for the trails. So instead of riding every day in the mud, started riding my road bike more, and then I rode that so much that I decided I wanted to start doing some races. And we had a team out of the shop here, and some of the other guys wanted to do the races too. And yeah, by the time, got into the early 2000s, mid 2000s, I enjoyed road racing as much as I enjoyed mountain biking, and then discovered cyclocross right around the same time. So I was, having fun all year long between road and mountain and cyclocross. And yeah, had a few wins. Most memorable was we had done a lot of like relay mountain bike 24-hour races back in the 90s, because that was a big thing. I'd never really thought about doing one solo, and then in 2003, one of my buddies, Dave Stewart, had won 24 hours of snowshoe solo, and we had trained together a lot, and I was just like, oh dang, all right, I'm just gonna do one and see, it'll just be like a training ride. And I ended up winning that. I just rode kind of like at a training pace the whole way, and the people that were in first and second and third, eventually they just kind of lost steam, and then by midnight I was in the lead, and then 8 hours later at 8 a.m. I had a big enough lead to take a nap, and I woke up and my whole body was locked up, and they were pushing me to get back out there again, so I wouldn't lose. And I ended up winning that race. So it was a great course, and it was a lot of fun. So I remember that was good. After that, I didn't want to do another one of those.
You notched a victory and decided time to move on. Let's go do some 45-minute cyclocross races.
Yeah, that was more my speed. That was more, shorter and stuff. I just wasn't getting enough long training rides in to really be able to do those regularly. I really couldn't ride for much. Like a month after that 24-hour race, I was shot. Like I had all kinds of tightness and stuff still from that race. So
yeah, I'm guessing some of it in your low back.
Yeah. I mean, everything was hurting after that. I had an IT band issue that I got from that. And that lasted the longest, but I had headaches and back, just everything hurt after that. So I was proud to take the W and never do one again.
There's something to a mic drop after a race like that. Done.
A lot of respect for those that do those on a regular basis. So.
Yeah, those guys and gals literally have a screw loose. There's just something special about them.
Some tough hombres.
Now you were doing all this post college.
Yeah.
So what are you doing for employment?
I was working in bike shops. So decided just being around shops that seemed like a great job. Just because I didn't know, with a history degree, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. It just seemed like a bike shop job just seemed really awesome. So I started working at Dick's Sporting Goods when they first came into town. I helped them open up the Tri-County location, and they put me in charge of the bike division because I was a cyclist, but still didn't know how to build a bike or,
you got to ride them, just didn't know how to fix them.
I know how to ride them. That's a good start, I guess. But that's where I learned the ropes. I was trained at Dick's, and then I enjoyed that. I worked there for a couple of years, and then one of my buddies that worked there with me got a job at Montgomery Cyclery, and he told me he was coming in and telling me about that, and I'm like, well, that sounds cool. And then so I went in and interviewed, and they hired me, and so I worked at the Montgomery location for 2 years, and really enjoyed that. Had a blast. Learned a lot. And then I was at the time still racing for Bio Wheels, and Bio Wheels, one of the guys that started it just burned out. So Matt's partner had burned out, and so Matt asked me if I would come on and help him run that shop, and that was 98 in the summertime. So
now, is that like a sweat equity kind of relationship? Were you working for him? What was the deal there?
It was it wasn't a lot of money either way at any place I ever worked. It was just, it was more about the the passion and enjoying it. And Matt put on a lot of events at the time, and so there was the retail, there's fixing bikes, but there's also going to the events on the weekend with teammates and stuff like that, which is that was what I enjoyed from college, having the teammates. So
the culture of the sport.
Yeah. So it was it wasn't a whole lot of money, but it was awesome. It's back in the
some humble beginnings there at Ludlow Garage. Our careful listeners may remember Ludlow Garage there in Clifton.
it was all mountain biking all the time. It was, the anodized parts, the Kuka cranks, the race space parts, all in the case, and
Yep.
we were all into that. That was kind of the height of the mountain biking boom. So that was, it was great. A lot of good memories there.
And so ultimately, there's at least one move out of the Ludlow garage,
Yeah,
into a new location, bricks and sticks, front door and a back door, in Clifton, and then a move to where you are right now, right?
yeah. So Matt, he and his family decided to take a move to Asheville, North Carolina, and they had some friends down there that they started a Bio Wheels in Asheville. And he's like, well, if you want to stay and run Bio Wheels then Cincinnati, then we'll keep Bio Wheels Cincinnati going. If not, no big thing. And so I said, sure. And he brought on another manager, Sue Williams. So between the two of us, we ran Bio Wheels, the second location on Clifton Avenue, by Good Sam Hospital. We ran that location for 6 years before we moved to our current one in Madeira. Along with that, Matt had been putting on a number of bike races, a number of mountain bike races and cyclocross races. And he gave me this big folder of information on those races and a duffel bag of pin flags and start finish line stuff. And he's like, here you go. If you want to run these, then, have at it. If not, no big deal. So I was still a mountain biker at the time, so I decided I didn't really want to put on any mountain bike events because I wanted to focus on, the races, but I would do the cyclocross events since I wasn't really racing them myself and I wasn't interested in racing them. So that started that whole pathway, that side pathway of putting on cyclocross events.
You've put on a couple of them. Let's talk a little bit about those UCI races. You brought the UCI, didn't you, to the Midwest?
Now, I was kind of in the groundswell that eventually did. I wouldn't say I was the first, but
I'm giving you too much credit.
Well, I would say I would, definitely in the year 2000 when I put on my first cyclocross race, there were 40 people, and then the next year I think I had 42. So the turnout's more big, and I wasn't super enthusiastic, but we started to see the participation and enthusiasm grow bigger, and then that got me excited, gave me oxygen to want to do a better job as a promoter. And so we brought the state championships to Harbin Park in 2003 and brought some sponsors on so we can do a little cash and get some better competition in here. And I saw through that cyclocross is a very exciting sport. And I felt like it was something that I wanted to continue to do and to do better at. And I started to pay attention to what the other race promoters were doing that were putting on national level events. We had some guys on our team that were going up to Chicago for Super Cup, and they would come back and tell me, oh, they're doing this and they're doing this really cool stuff. And they're getting like 100 guys in a race and stuff. And I'm like, I can't even imagine that. That's insane. So they said, well, you should bring a UCI race to Harbin. And, they're doing one in Michigan. Why don't we go check it out and then see what that takes. And so we went up to Michigan and checked that out, and it was awesome. Just seeing everybody from all over the country competing and the announcers, and it was just, it was like so different from what I had been doing. And I'm like, all right, I can go out and find the sponsorship for this. And so 2004 we brought our first UCI race to Cincinnati, and it was awesome. The buzz I had from pulling that off was one of the most memorable things in my life. Just when that was over and just soaking in the atmosphere and everything.
You mean going from 42 racers in your first cyclocross race to a couple hundred to more than a couple hundred? Yeah.
It's just such an exciting day of racing that I was just blown away by it. Really, I had no anticipation of what to expect, but just everybody cheering and seeing the bigger fields was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're giving back there when you're putting those races on, and that's as I understand it, that's not a real cash cow for you. race promoting?
It was just for fun. It was, it's all volunteers. There's just not enough money to be made in that to really not put whatever money it is back into the race to make it better. I could have made $500 or something like that at each of those races, but I would have rather just, done something to make the event better and put the $500 into that. And I just kind of did that for probably about 10 years, just kept reinvesting the money back into the events to make them bigger. And then the whole scene just kind of blossomed at the same time, not just Cincinnati, but Louisville and then Indy and Dayton. And
I was moving out of the Northeast is a niche sport to the rest of the country.
Yeah, so we showed that we can in the Ohio Valley we could do big events too, and everybody was really excited about that. So it's really grown into an amazing series that's still going.
It is. It's going strong.
Yeah,
despite COVID.
Well,
we're all back to normal now.
Maybe not last year. This year, though.
Right. We'll pick up right where we left off. Well, that's a little bit about you. Let's talk about where you came from. Let's talk about what you do. As far as getting into the bike fitting game, walk me through your two big certifications, the Retool and the International Bike Fitting Institute certifications. What goes into those? What are they? How are they certified? That sort of thing.
So Retool, they are owned by Specialized, but before they were bought by Specialized, they owned the technology, the motion capture technology that the majority of the world's best bike fitters use all across the world. And a lot of your pro tour teams, half of them were Retool fit. So they were also not tied to any one particular bike brand, like some previous fitting was. So any bike shop that was interested in having a fitter get taught and own the technology and to focus on bike fitting could do that. And that was perfect for us because we weren't tied to any particular brand and we weren't locked out of anything. So
it was the agnostic bike fitting option.
You're not trying to sell a particular bike, you're trying to fit something. Whereas, with some fitting protocols, your end goal is to sell somebody a bike from a particular brand or something like that you carry. And so Retool started off as agnostics, and they're trying to fit somebody and try to find somebody a bike that fit them, despite whatever brand.
Right, and there's a little more credibility to that because you're not tied to a particular industry or a particular bike manufacturer in the industry that's either shilling bikes or you might fit a certain brand of bike, one brand better than another. Right, and you don't have that bias going in if you're getting a Retool fit because it's here's what your fit is. Here's the bikes we can fit into that fit, to use the same word twice. And then tell me a little bit about the IBFI.
Yeah, so IBFI is maybe going on 4 or 5 years. They don't have schools, but they're kind of they are a network of the world's best fitters that developed a criteria for ranking fitters so that people that are interested in getting a bike fit done can go to their website. And if you Google best local bike fitter, their website will come up and they have their rankings and all the fitters that are underneath them ranked, and you can go in there and find the best ranked bike fitter in your area. So it's getting ranked by them. It's through experience, through fitting clients. It's through schooling. What schools have you attended, and they give you points for particular ones. What technology you're using in your studio. So it's like 3 or 4 different pieces of the pie that you get points for, and then those points qualify you for a ranking.
So they're like an accreditation outfit where Retool's an instructional outfit. Yeah, that makes sense.
So there's also, like, if you went to college for sports medicine, that would also be a part of it as well.
Okay.
I didn't, but so through all of like my accumulated points through different schools I've gone to and different technologies available in my studio, and the amount of experience I have, I rank as a category 3, which is up in the top level.
Good. Now let's talk about the tools of the trade. We know you use a video camera. You've got those sticky sensor things. You got a fancy bike there to your left. You got all kinds of computer screens when you're doing the bike fit. What are the tools of your particular tools of the trade?
I mean, first and foremost, it's your experience and your eye in knowing if somebody's coming here for a particular goal, knowing what to look for in order to achieve the goal. So if somebody's coming in here with saddle discomfort and like they can't ride more than an hour without getting off the bike because their butt hurts, or they're getting knee pain, or they're getting shoe pain, and they have to take their shoes off every 30 miles. It's really experience that helps you to know what to look for, so that you're not wasting time dealing with stuff that's irrelevant to their issues. So Retool has a protocol that's super thorough. It's anywhere from 2 to 3 hour protocol involving a functional assessment where we look at the rider's limitations, whether it's flexibility or poor core strength, or they need wide shoes, whatever. There's lots of things that we look for in each client. And if you look at somebody's existing position coming in here, sometimes there's some giveaways there. In terms of the technology that we use during the fit each time, 3D motion capture, infrared cameras on each side of the body. So we film the left and the right side, look at joint angle relationships. We kind of know after 30 to 40 years of fitting, there's certain relationships we're after and ones that we're not. And if somebody's saddle is too low, that will help us to give us a clue into that, among other things.
I have one saddle too low story that I'll regale you with. You may or may not remember this. So we did a bike fit. This might have been 10 years ago, maybe even 15. And I'm out on business in Arizona, and I decide to take a crack at Mount Lemon. And I won't name the bike shop, but I go out there with my bike fit numbers and rent a bike, tell them I'm going to go do Mount Lemon. And we get into a disagreement about my saddle height. And what this young man wanted me to do was just sit on the saddle, put my heel down, and wherever my heel landed on the spindle, that was going to be my saddle height.
Okay.
And then when I measured it off, it was 1.5 centimeters lower than what I've been riding at home. And it got a little tense. And because he's the bike shop guy, I end up deferring to him. Okay. And I ended up with a knee injury for like 6 weeks after that climb, because the saddle was too low by 1.5 centimeters. And that doesn't sound like a lot to a casual listener, but that's a significant change in somebody's saddle height, and especially going and climbing a mountain with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, just knowing you as long as I have, I know that you're what they call a micro absorber. Is you're very sensitive to small changes in fit. Some people can handle, 1.5 centimeters and not have pain. And some people, and most people, if you've been riding for a while, that's going to be a problem.
Well, it also goes with my really sensitive personality.
Well, I think you've gotten to the point now where you can handle differences. I remember back then your back was giving you issues
for sure.
Sometimes. So, but that's changed. I mean, just you've been putting out a lot more miles, and so you can handle a lot of different things. But yeah, I mean, as far as the old rules of thumb, like putting your heel on the pedal from the saddle, that can be effective for getting started, because some people are way further off than 1.5 centimeters with their saddle height, and that would get them maybe closer than where they're at. But there's some certain things that can throw that measurement off, like maybe that person leans to the right as they're dropping their heel. Maybe they're pointing their toe too much. So there's enough kind of variables in there to maybe cause that to be pretty far off from your ideal saddle height.
It was not ideal for 6 weeks after the ride, I can tell you that.
Yeah, and that's what, honestly, a lot of people try their own fitting before they come in for a professional fitting, and they do the same kind of stuff and mixed results. It's sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
So,
I
so
was
when I think about a bike fit, obviously not as a bike fitter, but a guy that's gotten a handful of them and ridden a few bikes. Um, I think about a bike fit before I get into kind of knee rotation or alignment, not rotation, knee alignment, ankle alignment, shims in the saddles, all that's, or excuse me, shims in the shoes and the type of
right.
saddle. I think about the fit in like a front triangle and a rear triangle. Like you fit your legs and then you fit the front of you.
Right.
Is that a too broad brush approach to not the entire fit, but looking at a fit, and then maybe it breaks down to, if you got a knee issue, we're going to use the 3D cameras to pick up on what your plane is, either this way, that way, or straight up and down, or how does your ankle rotating? Does it have enough movement? Is that a fair way to look at it? Because what I'm warming up to, and I do ultimately want to talk about, is the different fits for the different disciplines,
Right.
and going all the way to time trialing, and then we'll come back. I don't want to quite go down that road yet.
Gotcha.
I'm pretty sure my bike fit is the same not the saddle, but the same um, saddle height, but a
Right.
radically different looking front end. Okay. When you sit down and look at a cyclist and they get on either the retool bike or they get on their existing bike and you're just eyeballing them, I mean, are you looking at them that way, or do you take a totally different approach? I'm not suggesting by asking the question the way I did that there's a right way to do it, but, or excuse me, my way is the right way of doing it. But I do, in my own mind, think about all my bikes, and as long as my
Right.
saddle height's okay, now we can monkey with the front end, but that's got to be right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because a lot of times if you're having lower chain issues, pain, soreness, whatever, it's from a problem with your saddle position. Could be a problem with your saddle too. A lot of people have just bad saddles; they don't fit, or they're not in the right location. So, and that comes up a lot with long course triathlon. You know, I do a lot of Ironman athletes. Most people, the people that I fit the most are the people that are riding the longest, because they're the ones that really can't avoid getting fit well, because
Yeah.
they're usually, whether it's an endurance gravel rider or somebody that does a lot of charity road events, Grand Fondos, or 100-mile charity rides. I mean, they're just out there longer periods of time. Their fit needs to be better. People that are riding casually for less than an hour usually aren't hurt.
Right.
Usually they're not in pain. They're not riding long enough or hard enough to get there. So I don't see a lot of those folks unless they're being proactive, which is smart. But everybody that we sell a bike to, they get that professional fit experience, whether they want to or not, whether they ask for it or not. We just feel like that's the best way to get started. But for most
Well, if they're
people,
not comfortable, they're not going to ride their bike, right? I mean, if they're got low
yeah,
back pain or a hot spot on the ball of their foot, they're just going to find a reason to not ride.
yep. And they're expecting you to get fit. They're expecting to be fit when they buy their bike from you, whether you're going to do that fit or not. When I say you, I mean a bike shop. And most bike shops still aren't doing a very solid fit. They may put somebody on a trainer for 15 minutes. They may watch them around the parking lot, but that would pretty much be it. And you're not going to really find out too much in that short a period of time. But once somebody gets to the point where they're out there getting in 100 miles a week, or they're training for something, then they start to realize that, okay, I need a more serious look because I'm experiencing these negative things and it's costing me. So then they'll come in.
Yeah.
But,
Obviously, well, let's talk about the lines you sell. You sell some pretty nice bikes. You're into Moots, right?
yeah.
Specialized, Piranello, Cervelo, anybody else?
Cervelo, Specialized, BMC,
BMC.
Pinarello, and Moots.
Yeah, I was missing BMC. So the folks that are coming in and buying bikes off of you have probably been riding for at least a little while. Yes, no, maybe so. Right.
Mhm.
So just percentage wise, because we don't know who our audience is going to be when they're listening to this podcast. We may have somebody that's never ridden a bike before, and they're thinking, I got to go out and buy a bike. And cautionary tale, if you're that person listening to this podcast, there may be a real big difference between a 54 and a 56, or a 56 and a 58. And that bike shop may be motivated to sell you what's on the floor, and it may be a 56 when you need a 54. Okay. That's where a bike fit comes in. It's going to tell you first what your fit is. And then you actually, in your database, can back in the manufacturers and make sure that that fit's going to work for them, whether it's stack height on the stem, or fore and aft position on the saddle. Fair statement?
Yeah, or buying online too, which is even worse.
Oh, that's verboten. We don't even talk about this on this podcast. Support your local bike shop if you're listening.
Yeah.
So what I guess what I'm inartfully moving towards here is a question is, you start with the fit as a bike fit studio, and you're a bike fit studio that happens to sell some really nice bikes. So it's fit first, bike second, and folks will come to you with, I don't want to name names, but it might start with a C and end with an N and resemble something that's grand out west. The bike shows up, they don't know how to fit it. You'll fit those folks without any bias, or you won't look down your nose at them because they're a customer and they deserve to have the right fitting bike.
Yeah.
But my plug for your studio is, not only are you doing the bike fit, but your database will go across all manufacturers, not just the bikes you're selling. Correct?
Yep.
So they might be looking at a bike you don't sell, and you can tell them if that bike's going to fit them, or they may fall into, that kind of classic 57 bike frame where you're not a 56, you're not a 58, and a 57 would fit you perfect, but only a handful of manufacturers run bikes and those kind of lockstep. Pernilla comes to mind, but those kind of lockstep 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57. All right. So your studio is agnostic in that regard. Database will tell you how you'll fit on every single bike. The other thing that occurs, and it's sitting right next to you, is you'll know how that bike will fit based on all those hydraulic gizmos on the Guru bike, right?
We do our fitting on a infinitely adjustable fitting bike using motion capture technology, and then after doing a functional assessment of the rider, and when we're done, we're able to 3D scan in the measurements off of here into a report, and from there you're going to get a handlebar XY measurement in space relative to the bottom bracket, and that from there we can tell, okay, so this is kind of what we're looking at for you in terms of frame size, and whether it's endurance, or whether we're going to recommend an endurance style frame, which would be more of a casual upright, or more of a race frame. Just as much of that hinges on somebody's functionality in terms of their flexibility and their core strength and their overall athleticism, as it does what their height is. Because you can have a twin brother or sister that's set up, has the same build as you, but you might ride two different size bikes based on your functionality and experience. So that's something you'll pick up in a bike fitting that you won't pick up taking measurements off of your body.
Yeah. Those infamous online calculators that all you have to put in is 7 variables and it'll fit the bike for you.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna jump around on you just a little bit, if that's all right, with some things that maybe are on my mind and listeners' minds. Although you can never predict why somebody doesn't like their bike fit on a podcast. But I'm thinking about sits bones, and I didn't even know what a sit bone was until about 10 years ago, and it was physique that kind of turned me on to the fact that the way your pelvis rotates will really affect what type of saddle you're supposed to be on. Now, I don't know what saddle manufacturers were doing for the previous 100 years, but that was an eye-opener for me, that you got a sit bone measurement, and then you've got these hip flexor issues that will drive what type of saddle you need to be riding on. So if you could just talk for a minute or two about sits bones and what's going on with your pelvis and how that drives saddle selection.
Sure.
And maybe even across disciplines, because I've got a much different looking saddle on my TT bike than
Yeah.
I do on my gravel bike than I do on my road bike.
How much time we got?
I'll give you 5 minutes for that.
All right. I'll try to make this as quality a 5-minute spiel as I can. But so I think most of your maybe listeners would be road or maybe gravel, maybe a few that do triathlon or time trial. So I'll focus on road. So I think the most important thing is that for most people, having pressure on the sit bones, there's 3 of them, 1 in the front, 2 in the back, versus the soft tissue in the middle, it makes it easier for you to ride longer distances. Numbness and pain and soreness comes from a lot of pressure going to the soft tissue that runs between your bones. So first and most important thing about saddle choice is making sure the size is right. And they come in different widths. It's important to be measured correctly and accurately with your sit bone width.
No, stop there. How do you do that as a fitter? How do you measure somebody's sit bones?
We have them sit on a digital pressure mapping mat, and the sit bone, the point of the most pressure, projects onto a computer monitor, and then the computer measures it in millimeters. And then we get that center to center distance, and then from there we'll recommend an end-to-end width for the rider. It'll actually be up on the computer as well, but that's kind of how we do our sit bone measuring. There's other ways you can do it at home, but nothing to that level of accuracy. So, but it's important to know that saddles come in different widths, and it's important to get the correct one. So if you have narrow sit bones, and if you're on a saddle that's too wide, typically you end up scooting forward on it to get onto the part of the saddle that fits your rear sit bones the best. But then you're not aligning yourself out with the cutouts or the channels properly. And then vice versa, if your sit bones are wider than the saddle you're sitting on, then your bones end up on the outsides, kind of the wings of your saddle. And a lot of times the saddle will drop off to those wings. And so all this domed stuff will go right up the middle and put pressure on, where blood's trying to go. And so you get a lot of numbness and stuff from that. So,
and we have female listeners, and sit bones issues are different, to delicately state it, across the genders. So you have experience fitting ladies and making sure that their sit bones line up with female appropriate saddles. And I've got a hazard guess that it can be a bedeviling exercise for some female cyclists out there to find a saddle that fits. And that's one of the benefits to professional bike fit, is getting those sit bones measured. So at least your starting point, and you're not guessing when you've spent $300 on a saddle that it's going to work. And then when it doesn't, you pretend like it doesn't, everything's okay, because you always spent that money. Right. And you'll demo these saddles for your clients, won't you?
Yeah. Once we know that in the clinic here that it feels comfortable, and as long as it's comfortable during here, then once they buy it and take it home, if they have any issues with it, we'll take it back. And then if it doesn't work, we'll move on to another one. But yeah, I mean, it's the first part of our fitting is looking at saddles, it's taking those measurements. So it's the most important. If your saddle doesn't fit you, it's tough for the rest of the bike to fit.
Right. It's literally the first contact point, even before your cleats. So help me understand, like, when Physique came out with the Aeron, and then they came out with the Aliante, and I think they have one in between. What's going on between taking the Aliante and comparing it to the Aeron? So what's going on with your hips, and what type of rider would suit what type of saddle in general?
So I mean, there's been a lot of new saddles from them, and amongst many other brands. But when they set up their recommendations, so the Aliante, that goes back at least 12 years. That saddle, that's got a bit of a pocket in there, right? It curves down the middle. So if you're sitting upright, that pocket fits really well. Like you're just locked in there. It's really comfortable. But if you're spending a lot of your time riding aggressively with your arms stretched out and maybe going into the drops, and you're spending a lot of your time like that, then that upward kind of ramp into the nose can start putting pressure on your soft tissue and cause numbness. So they're they got the Arione and then the Antares that have more of a flat nose, so you don't have that upward ramp that you're leaning out. And now it's they have ones with lots of cutouts. So now the cutouts really help you get low and get your hips rotated forward, putting more pressure on the front of the saddle without getting the numbness. So we really recommend saddles with cutouts.
And just throwing it out there, I think Specialized has made some very recent gains in that particular department of matching cutouts to hip rotation. I don't know if there's other manufacturers that, I don't want you to plug them one over the other, but maybe talk about the breadth of manufacturers that you have in the saddle manufacturers that you have in the shop.
Yeah, so I mean, we used to do Physique a lot. We still do a little bit of them, but Specialized has done a really good job. I mean, because everything for them is fit centric when it comes to their touch point parts. So their saddles, their shoes. I mean, they're all scrutinized over thoroughly by the bike fitters from Retool. So there's a lot of thought that goes into them, and they work really well. So we normally do kind of a blind sit test on a lot of these. So when we're like maybe an hour and a half into our fit, we start looking at some different saddles if the saddle was one of the issues that the client had. And I'll just kind of randomly put some saddles, all the proper size for them underneath them, and they'll ride a minute on one. I'll ask them to give me a grade, 1 to 100, 60 being lousy, 70 being okay but not great, 80 being pretty comfortable, 90 being awesome. So I'll have them grade each one, and then we'll kind of end up with 1 or 2 that we look at as a final. And so I would do, like, I carry Pro saddles, Salitalia, Physique, Specialized, and I would try to mix it up, some different brands in there. And a lot of times that Specialized just always ended up being the last one or one of the last 2. So my inventory is kind of, as certain saddles have been coming up as the winter more and more, those are saddles I just can't not have in stock.
Yeah.
So I'll let ones go that just aren't interesting to people and let them go out of stock, and then I'll just refill in with ones that are doing really well. So that's kind of how I do my inventory of saddles and shoes in here based on client feedback.
Sure. So I kind of directed the questioning there to saddles. If you could talk for a minute or 5 about shoe selection, maybe cleat placement and knee alignment, and how those things line up with regard to, do you need shims? Do you need an orthotic? What's getting corrected? That type of thing, and how you go about identifying an issue, correcting it in air quotes, and then objectively measuring that correction. Sure.
So with shoes, you want a supportive feel from your shoe. It should wrap around your foot, but you should have room to wiggle your toes around freely. Usually like 0.5 centimeter of room to the front of the shoe from your biggest toe is a good starting point, good rule of thumb. The shoe should be wide enough for your metatarsals so that it's not squeezing your foot from the side. And one thing I've found that was probably surprising to me, now it isn't because I'm just used to it, but a lot of people have wide feet, especially as you age. Our arches tend to drop and our foot tends to spread out. So, whereas you may have been a C width when you were in high school, 15, 20 years later, all of a sudden you're a D, you're encroaching, wide shoes. And,
so that's why I'm shorter now than I was in high school. I've lost some arch height.
Among other things.
Maybe some dried out vertebrae. I digress.
Yeah. I mean, you see a lot with kids when I'm fitting younger kids, a lot of them have narrow feet. And then when I'm fitting older folks like ourselves, I'm starting to see D.
Hey, let me correct you. When you're fitting master's age athletes, it's got a different ring to it.
Yeah. So, if you're getting a foot pain and you think you may have a wide foot, but you're not sure if your shoe is wide, you may want to check, because that's probably the number one thing that causes extreme foot discomfort is your shoe's too narrow. And metatarsals are being squeezed together from the side and nerves are getting pinched and whatnot. I come across that all the time. So that's one thing about shoes that's important is make sure you get the right size and right width. If you get too big of a shoe and there's too much space there, then the screw holes for your cleat bolts aren't in the right spot in the ball of your foot. They're too far forward. And then you end up pushing down on the axle of the pedal with the front of your ball of your foot instead of the center of the ball of your foot. That can cause numbness too. So you got to be careful that you're not buying too big a shoe in order to get something that fits you better width-wise. Go for a wide shoe, one that's, an actual wide shoe. Lake makes an excellent wide shoe, specialized as well. So that's probably the most important thing that a lot of people aren't aware of coming in.
And when you're talking about metatarsal pain, I mean, does that translate into hot spots?
Yep.
Okay.
Hot spots, numbness, tingling. Mentioned wedges. So a lot of people have a natural outward tilt to their foot. They call varus tilt, where the outside of your pinky ball of your foot kind of floats down here, whereas your big toe is like this. So if you just kind of look at your foot at rest, and is it at an angle? And if so, a lot of times when you're pushing down on your pedal, every time you put more weight here on the outside than you do on the inside. And so what a wedge does is it goes in between your cleat and the sole of your shoe, and it puts your shoe on a tilt so that when you're pushing down, there's more contact up in here so that it gets spread out amongst the whole ball of your foot. Hot spots come from a pressure that goes to a small section of your foot, and then it just causes pressure and pain, and then it radiates out from there. Whereas wedges kind of help to spread that pressure out.
So you're putting your finger on something I didn't appreciate. So if we have a listener with a hot spot, it could be one of two main, but could be other things. Culprits: shoe width, and then the shim, which goes beneath the sole of the shoe and the cleat interface. That will kind of bring your foot back to plane, lack of a better way of describing it. Is that kind of a layman's
another example would be like for runners, a lot of runners like myself, when I was a runner, I would wear out the outside of the sole of my shoe, and there'd be no wear on the inside. So when I was running, I was landing on the outside. For cyclists, that translates into pressure on the outside of your foot, and that small amount of pressure in that one part causes a hot spot. And that hot spot, as you ride longer and longer, grows and radiates into your whole foot, and then it can cause tingling and pain. So the more support you have on your whole foot, not just up here, but back through the arch as well, will mitigate shoe pain.
So I may be anticipating the answer to the next question, but when you're fitting somebody for insoles, is that more directed towards lining up their knee in the correct alignment versus relying on the shim to do that?
It's about maintaining lower chain integrity, like in proper alignment through the knee, through the ankle. When we pronate, as we put pressure down on our foot, say we do a single leg squat or something along those lines, which is basically what you do when you pedal, right? Single leg squat 15,000 times over 3 hours. If you're pushing down hard and there's no support underneath your arch, your ankle will drop in, your arch collapses, and that pulls your lower leg off to the side inward. And then you get torsion kind of at the knee joint. So a footbed gets up inside of your arch and holds it in place so that when you're pushing down, you have integrity with your foot and the alignment stays pure. And number one, it gives you more, it captures more of your power and gets it into forward motion, because your foot collapsing robs you of some energy.
Robs you of watts. Nobody wants to lose watts.
Right. And then it misaligns your ankle joint. So it kind of preserves that, and it's better for your lower chain, especially with your knee.
And you can, and with your fit system, you can find that if it's occurring, correct it with the footbed, and then measure it after the footbed to see if you've restored, so to speak, correct alignment. Okay.
Yeah. It's about comfort too. And again, trying to have the shoe pressure be even throughout your foot, and it helps your brain and your foot communicate when you're feeling your whole bottom of your foot against the bottom of your shoe. So a custom insole, like the retool ones that we do, are basically a match for the bottom of your foot. They get in there, and you feel the entirety of the bottom of your shoe. Whereas if you just use stock insoles, you're mainly feeling the outside of your shoe down.
All right.
Which is good.
So I'm kind of bouncing around on topics here. The last one I want to talk about, or maybe it may be a philosophical discussion, time trialing fits.
Mhm.
Now, I know, and anybody that's been on a bike knows that, or tried to time trial on a bike knows that it's very difficult to maintain the same level of wattage, for example, on your 20-minute power test, on your time trialing bike as compared to your road bike, because you're more upright and you're laying down more power on your road bike. You're tucking people in, making them more aero, and maybe as a general rule, maybe not, you can correct me, they're losing some watts because they're more constrained, both from a lung capacity standpoint and because you're limiting the range of motion of the legs because you're kind of out and over the front end of your bike. Are there fitting philosophies for fitters with regard to sacrificing power for aero, and then how do you fit comfort in there? I mean, it's quite a balancing act.
Well, it depends on the length of the event. Obviously, if it's only a half an hour, say it's a Cleves time trial, it's 20 minutes, 25 minutes, then, obviously you want power, but you also want the aerodynamics. Comfort would be like a distant third.
Very.
But when you're talking about an hour-long event, like twice the distance, then all of a sudden comfort starts to become more important because, if you're feeling twisted up for half the event or more, then you're going to lose power, lose speed. So comfort becomes more important. Most of my athletes are Ironman athletes that I'm doing time trial fits for. So for them, comfort is number one because you're 5 hours.
You're at it for a while.
It's a lot longer than a half an hour. It's 5 hours. Not only that, but you have to run a marathon afterwards. So you can't be feeling twisted up for any length of time. The comfort's number one. Aero and power are they're all important, but comfort's going to be most important. But if we're, you mentioned time trial. So, if it's somebody that's going to be trying to win a time trial event at Blue Streak or something like that, they have to be aero and they have to be a little twisted up and they have to practice that position. They can't just ride their road bikes and then jump on their TT bike and do the event. I mean, you're going to lose a lot of power because you just don't have that muscle acclimation and, it's just different use of your muscles. So you have to get out there and practice on the TT bike, just like Lance did.
Yep.
Tour.
He who will not be named.
Yeah, the more time you spend on that TT bike or the tri bike, the better off you're going to be the event day. You'll feel more familiar. But yeah, I mean, when we're building a position in here, I've worked with all different kinds of time trial guys that are finishing top 3 at Blue Streak, top 2, and for them, comfort is a distant last, and they're going to be doing nationals on that position too. So they're still more about power, more about aerodynamics, and so we just simulate with a TT bar here and get down as low and as flat as we can, and then set the bike up that way, and then have them practice it.
Get the adaptation.
Get the adaptation in, and if it's a problem and it's not doable, or they want to go even further, then we just follow up with another session.
And that's one of the benefits to your fit is there's we don't need to get into pricing. Folks can get on your website and get the pricing numbers, but you do an original fit, and that's what, a 2 or 3 hour process.
Yeah.
And then if you want to tweak it, then you can just come in for an hour and you charge an hourly rate or something along those lines to dial it in. So, for all the triathletes listening and time trial specialists listening, there is an art to that position and getting it just right. And you go out, you can test it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, and you want to tweak it, you're not investing in an entire bike fit. You're just coming in and tweaking the front end of that bike. Back to my original point about the way I look at a bike fit may not be the right way. You got your rear triangle and then you got your front triangle, and that front triangle, at least in a TT position, can be an ongoing process.
Yep.
for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and sometimes you take it in steps rather than going 100% towards trying to be like as low as the bike will go. You just do it in steps. You just take it down, practice with it, take it down some more, practice with it, and then eventually you find your limit. But we also like to validate the position on the road out here too. So, since we have such great roads around the Dura,
Sure.
after we're done in here, I'll set the bike up, validate it on the trainer, and then validate it outside, with the helmet and sighting and all of that too. So they'll have a chance before they leave here to let me know how it feels out on the road. And then, once they go home and train on it, they can give me some more feedback later on.
Okay, last point. When somebody walks out of your fit studio, what do they walk out with? Beyond a bike fit, they get a piece of paper. And what's that piece of paper or pieces of paper tell them, and what's it look like?
They have a PDF, so if that counts as a piece of paper.
Yeah.
PDF that has the functional assessment report, the flexibility and kind of how everything checked out there, their bike measurements, their body position left and right, some images, videos. So they get that. I keep it stored here as well. So if they lose track of all that, then I'll have it on my computer. We can pull up their measurements later. So they walk out with that. They also walk out, I would like to think, with an education. A lot of times they haven't been fit before. Most people, again, they always start off trying to do it themselves, and they use whatever information is available through the internet and whatever. A lot of it's confusing. A lot of it's contradictory. So I think the way that I apply it is just kind of down the middle with a lot of tried and true practices that have been done for a while, just using the most up-to-date technology.
And for your clients that travel and they're picking up a bike someplace, you can just forward that PDF to the bike shop, and they can have the bike dialed in to that exact bike fit.
Yeah, and I think also, because since we're full service shop, anything if they're looking at a new saddle, I've got hundreds of saddles on the wall, so they wouldn't have to wait for me to order something. A lot of times it's in stock, whether it's a road saddle or a tri-saddle. The footbeds are in stock. They're made. They take about 20-25 minutes, so we don't have to wait for those. So everything, your fit is done 9 times out of 10 when we wrap things up the first session. I'm able to complete the whole thing. You're not having to wait for a part.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, where you think you have a saddle that would work for your sits bones, but you're waiting for it to order in, and it's like, wait a second, I'm ready to try this fit out today. I want to know if it works tomorrow or it's on Saturday for my long ride. Not an issue for your shop. They just go out the door ready to rock and roll the next day, or a long ride on the following Saturday.
Yeah, and the saddle's installed on the spot correctly to the fit that we did here. So rather than getting it in the mail and being like, okay, so how does this go on again? What angle are we at again?
Right.
It's done, and you don't have to worry about that. So that's not something, sometimes you'll go in and get a fit at a really good place, but they just don't have a heavy inventory.
Yeah.
So you have to come back, or you have to order something yourself and try to install it yourself, but we take care of all that. So that's something to go out with.
And looking over your left shoulder, it looks like you have a pretty good inventory of shoes as well.
That comes up a lot, like we mentioned before, with widths and lengths. Or some people just come in here and their shoes are like 15 years old, and I'm like, how long are we going to be rocking those shoes for? And you're thinking about maybe looking at new shoes anytime soon, and maybe we'll look at some shoes while the person's in here. But a lot of people, they're in here because they have a shoe problem. Their feet hurt.
Yeah.
And if I don't have the shoes in stock, then I'm not helping them. So, even in today's environment with, lack of supply, we still have a decent supply in stock. We focus on this kind of stuff. So this is stuff we try to be without, this is probably the least amount of shoes we've had in stock in years, and there's still a ton out there. So we have to have it in stock.
Yeah, if your feet hurt and you got to fix them, you got to have the tools of your trade.
Yeah, literally it's they sign up for a fit and it says my feet hurt, and if I don't have shoes in stock that are going to work, then they just wasted their 4-hour drive here, right?
Yeah.
So I have to have some hopefully some good options here for them.
Yeah, and it's an argument for buying your shoes at a local bike shop, not online. I'll just leave it at that. So, Mitch, I know you're a busy man. I know you have a fit coming up and you're squeezing us in. So before we sign off, how do folks find you?
So what our website is biowheels.com, and there's a fitting page on there that's pretty easy to find. There's a bunch of FAQ, frequently asked questions on there. You can sign up online there. Got pictures. So if you have any questions, there's a little chat window on our website that if you click on it, you can send a text to me. And if you have any questions or anything like that, that's a good way to reach me.
And folks can schedule right online, can't they?
Yeah, right on that page, there's an online scheduler.
Well, if you're listening and your feet hurt or your back hurts or your shoulders are a little tight or any sundry of maladies that come over cyclists, give Mitch a call. I'm sure he can fix you up just right. Mitch, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.